I still replay that moment in my head sometimes, the absolute silence in the room after I spoke, the way everyone's faces just froze. My own brother, standing there, red-faced and practically spitting fire, demanding that I hand over the house I'd worked my entire life for. $1 million mansion, he called it, like it was some kind of lottery win I'd just stumbled into. He actually expected me to sign over the deed. Was I wrong for the words that came out of my mouth next? Tell me honestly if you would have done the same thing. You see, my life has been anything but a straight line. I grew up in a small, cramped house with my parents and my older brother, Mark. Mark was always the golden child, the one who excelled in school, the one who got all the praise. I, on the other hand, was a dreamer. I loved art, writing, anything creative, but those pursuits didn't exactly pay the bills, especially not in the eyes of my very practical parents. They always encouraged me to follow in Mark's footsteps, to get a real job, to pursue a stable career. Mark went to a prestigious university, got a high-paying corporate job straight out of college, and quickly started climbing the ladder. He bought a nice house in the suburbs, had a perfect family, and, from all outward appearances, lived the quintessential American dream. I, however, struggled for years. I worked a string of minimum wage jobs, lived in tiny apartments, and poured every spare moment into my creative passions. My parents were constantly concerned about my future, which really meant they were constantly comparing me to Mark. Every family gathering involved a subtle, or not so subtle, interrogation about my career path, my savings, my love life, all the things they felt I was falling short on. Mark, of course, would chime in with his unsolicited advice, always from a place of perceived superiority. He'd tell me I needed to be more realistic, more driven, less dreamy. It got to the point where I started avoiding family functions just to escape the constant judgment. I loved my parents, and I loved Mark, in a complicated brotherly way, but their well-intentioned advice often felt like a suffocating blanket. Years passed, and I continued to plug away. My art slowly started to gain a following online. I poured my heart and soul into every piece, every commission, slowly building a reputation. It wasn't overnight success, not by a long shot. There were countless sleepless nights, moments of doubt, and times I almost gave up. But I kept going. I started saving every penny, investing wisely, and slowly, meticulously, building my own future. My parents still didn't really understand what I did. They'd nod vaguely when I talked about online galleries or social media algorithms, their eyes glazing over. Mark, ever the pragmatist, still viewed my work as a hobby, a nice little side hustle, that he generously assumed I probably broke even on. He never asked about my finances, never showed any real interest in the details of my business. He just assumed I was perpetually struggling, always a step behind him. And I let them believe it. It wasn't out of malice, but more out of a desire for peace. Explaining the intricacies of my growing success felt like an uphill battle, and honestly, after years of being underestimated, there was a quiet satisfaction in just letting them assume. I continued to live modestly, even as my income grew exponentially. I drove an older car, wore simple clothes, and avoided any flashy displays of wealth. My investments were doing incredibly well, and I started looking for a place to finally call my own, a place where I could create without compromise. That's when I found it, an old, sprawling house on a huge lot, nestled in a quiet, secluded area. It was a fixer-upper, a real diamond in the rough, but I saw its potential. I poured my heart, soul, and a significant portion of my savings into renovating it, turning it into a beautiful, modern sanctuary, complete with a massive studio space. It became my haven, my masterpiece, the physical embodiment of all my hard work and perseverance. I didn't tell my family about it. I didn't tell anyone, actually. It was my secret, my quiet victory. Then came my parents' 40th wedding anniversary. It was a big celebration, a fancy dinner at a nice restaurant. Everyone was there, my parents, Mark and his wife Sarah, their 2 perfect children, and a few close relatives. The conversation, as always, eventually turned to me. My mother, with a sigh, asked when I was finally going to settle down, buy a proper place, and stop renting that tiny apartment. I just smiled and vaguely gestured that I was working on it. Then Mark, ever the helpful big brother, chimed in. You know, if you just focused less on your hobbies and more on a real career, you could actually afford a decent home, like Sarah and I. He paused, taking a sip of his wine, a smug look on his face. In fact, I just heard about a beautiful mansion for sale in the exclusive Willow Creek Estates. It's a bit pricey, probably out of most people's league, but it's a stunning property. He went on and on about the house, describing its lavish features, its sprawling grounds, completely unaware that he was describing my house. The house I had bought and renovated. My heart pounded in my chest. I kept a poker face, listening to him unknowingly boast about my own property. The problem was, a mutual acquaintance, someone who knew about my new home, was also at the dinner. Let's call her Aunt Carol. Aunt Carol, bless her well, meaning but utterly indiscreet heart, looked at me, then at Mark, a confused expression on her face. Wait, she said. Mark, you're talking about the old Miller place, aren't you? The one with the huge studio wing, because I'm pretty sure that's where my name lives now. I saw his car there last week. The silence that followed was deafening. Mark's jaw dropped. My parents stared at me, then at Aunt Carol, then back at me, their faces a mixture of shock and disbelief. What? Mark finally spluttered, his voice rising. No, that's impossible. That house is worth over $1 million. He can't afford that. And that's where everything exploded. The truth was out. My quiet victory was no longer quiet. I tried to explain, to tell them I'd been working hard, investing, that my art had become incredibly successful. But Mark wasn't listening. He was furious. You've been lying to us all this time. He roared, right there in the restaurant. You let us think you were struggling, while you were secretly hoarding a fortune. How could you do that to us, your family? My parents, still reeling, were also hurt. They felt betrayed, like I'd deliberately kept them in the dark, made them worry unnecessarily. The rest of the dinner was a disaster. The anniversary celebration turned into an interrogation, a blame game, with me in the hot seat. Mark was the loudest, the most vehement. He accused me of being manipulative, of being selfish, of rubbing my success in his face. It was as if my success was a personal affront to him, an insult to his carefully constructed life. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. The next few weeks were a blur of angry phone calls, accusations, and emotional outbursts from my family. My parents eventually came around, somewhat, understanding that I hadn't intentionally tried to deceive them, but rather had just wanted to avoid the constant scrutiny and comparison. But Mark was a different story. He couldn't let it go. He felt personally slighted, believing that my sudden wealth somehow diminished his own achievements. He started calling me, demanding to know the details of my finances, how much I had, how I'd made it. He even hinted that I owed him something for all the advice he'd given me over the years. I tried to reason with him, to explain that my success was my own, earned through years of hard work and sacrifice, but he wouldn't hear it. He just saw a giant sum of money and a house he felt he was entitled to. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. How would you have handled a brother who felt entitled to your hard-earned success? Would you have given in to his demands, tried to appease him, or stood your ground? The breaking point came a few months later. Mark organized a family meeting at my parents' house. I walked in, and the atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension. Mark was pacing back and forth, a self-righteous look on his face. My parents sat on the couch, looking uncomfortable and torn. Sarah, Mark's wife, sat beside him, nodding in agreement with his every point. "All right," Mark began, without even a greeting, "we need to talk about this house situation." He gestured dismissively towards me. "It's clear you've been incredibly fortunate, more fortunate than you deserve, frankly, considering you never bothered to get a real job. And as your family, as your older brother who always looked out for you, I think it's only fair that we all benefit from your sudden windfall." My blood ran cold. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Benefit? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. "What exactly are you suggesting, Mark?" He puffed out his chest. "I'm suggesting that you hand over the deed to that mansion. It's too much for one person. Sarah and I, we have 2 children, a growing family. We need more space. That house would be perfect for us. You can stay in your little apartment or buy a smaller place. It's the least you could do for your family." My parents gasped. Even Sarah looked a little uncomfortable, though she quickly recovered and gave Mark a supportive squeeze on the arm. I stared at him, dumbfounded. He genuinely believed he was entitled to my home, my sanctuary, the product of my relentless hard work. All the years of being underestimated, of being told I wasn't good enough, of being compared to him, it all came crashing down in that moment. A lifetime of resentment, of feeling like the lesser brother, boiled to the surface. I looked at my parents, who were speechless, then at Sarah, who was avoiding my gaze, and finally back at Mark, who stood there with an expectant, almost triumphant smirk. He was waiting for me to crumble, to concede, to apologize for my success. But something inside me snapped. I took a deep breath, and in a voice that was calm, clear, and utterly devoid of emotion, I delivered the line that brought the entire room to a chilling halt. "Mark," I said, "I earned that house. You earned nothing from me. And since you're so concerned about fair distribution of wealth within the family, perhaps we should start with your parents. Maybe you should give them back every penny they spent on your prestigious university education, the down payment they gave you for your first house, and all the financial support they've provided you with over the years, because unlike you, I paid for everything myself from the ground up." The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Mark's face went from confident to utterly ashen. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. My parents looked like they'd seen a ghost, their eyes wide with shock. Sarah, who had been so smug just moments before, now looked horrified, her hand still frozen on Mark's arm. The silence was absolute, suffocating. Mark, who had always been the golden boy, the successful one, the one who never had to ask for help, was suddenly confronted with the raw truth of his own privilege, laid bare for everyone to see. He had always taken their support for granted, never acknowledging the immense head start it had given him. I had just exposed the foundation of his perceived superiority. He had nothing to say. He just stood there, speechless, defeated. He knew, everyone knew, that I was right. He had demanded my hard-earned property based on a twisted sense of entitlement, and I had countered with an unassailable truth that he couldn't argue against. The meeting ended shortly after that. Mark mumbled something about needing to leave, and he and Sarah practically fled the house. My parents, still stunned, could only offer hesitant apologies for his behavior. The aftermath was complicated. Mark and I didn't speak for months. Eventually, my parents brokered a truce, but things were never the same between us. He never again mentioned my house, or my finances, or any sense of entitlement. He seemed to have finally understood the difference between hard-earned success and inherited advantage. Our relationship is still strained, but at least there's a newfound, albeit grudging, respect. My parents, on the other hand, finally truly saw and appreciated my journey. They stopped comparing me to Mark, and instead became incredibly proud of what I had achieved entirely on my own. Looking back, I don't regret what I said. It was harsh, yes, but it was the truth, and it needed to be said. Sometimes you have to stand up for yourself, even against family, especially when they try to diminish your accomplishments or claim what isn't theirs. It taught me a valuable lesson about boundaries, about the difference between family love and financial entitlement. My mansion, my beautiful sanctuary, remains my own, a testament to years of unwavering dedication and self-reliance. So, that's my story. It was a hell of a ride and a tough lesson learned. If you were on my side, if you think I did the right thing, then please like this video. Subscribe for more stories like this, where real people share their craziest, most unbelievable experiences. And most importantly, share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section below. I'll see you all in the next story.